Beneath the rolling hills and fairy chimneys of Cappadocia lies a hidden world, one that defies imagination. Picture this: vast underground cities, some descending as deep as 18 stories, with tunnels stretching for miles, connecting chambers that once housed thousands of people. These aren't just caves or simple shelters, but elaborate, multi-level metropolises carved entirely by hand into the soft volcanic rock. How did such places come to exist? And what drove entire communities to live their lives in the darkness below? The answers are as mysterious as the cities themselves, woven from threads of survival, faith, and human resilience. This isn't just a story about architecture or ancient engineering. It's a glimpse into the minds of people who faced unimaginable threats and responded with extraordinary creativity. Think about the sheer determination it took to carve out these spaces, not just for temporary refuge, but for generations to thrive. Schools, stables, churches, even wineries, all hidden beneath the earth. Who were these people, and what were they hiding from? The theories range from invading armies to religious persecution, each more compelling than the last. But one thing is certain: these underground cities stand as a testament to human adaptability, a reminder that when faced with danger, we don't just survive, we innovate. Today, we're going to journey through time, exploring the secrets of Cappadocia's subterranean marvels. We'll walk the same tunnels where ancient families sought safety, uncover the ingenious systems that kept these cities functioning, and piece together the clues left behind by those who called this underground world home. Along the way, you'll discover how ventilation shafts functioned like ancient air conditioning, how massive stone doors could seal off entire sections in an instant, and why some historians believe these cities were far more than just hideouts. By the end, you'll see Cappadocia's underground not just as a historical curiosity, but as a mirror reflecting humanity's unyielding spirit. So let's step into the shadows together, because the deeper we go, the more astonishing the story becomes. To truly grasp the marvel of Cappadocia's underground cities, you have to start with the ground itself, because this isn't just any rock. Millions of years ago, volcanic eruptions blanketed the region in thick layers of ash, which over time compacted into a soft, porous stone called tuff. Imagine a material as easy to carve as hardened clay, but as stable as stone, perfect for chiseling out entire living spaces without collapsing under its own weight. That's the magic of Cappadocia's geology. While other ancient civilizations built upward with bricks and mortar, the people here dug downward, turning the earth itself into their architecture. The landscape above ground hints at what lies beneath. Those iconic fairy chimneys, towering spires of rock capped with harder basalt, are nature's own sculptures, shaped by centuries of wind and rain. But underground, human hands took over. The same softness that allowed erosion to create whimsical formations above made it possible to carve out vast chambers, staircases, and tunnels below. And here's the brilliance: tuff isn't just easy to work with, it's insulating. In a land of scorching summers and freezing winters, these underground chambers stayed cool when the sun blazed and warm when the snow fell. It's like the earth itself provided a natural climate control system, but the real engineering marvel, the rock's stability. Unlike loose soil or brittle stone, tuff could be hollowed out without constant fear of cave-ins. Builders could carve vertically as well as horizontally, creating cities that stacked level upon level, connected by narrow passageways and steep staircases. And they didn't stop at mere rooms. They added ventilation shafts that reached all the way to the surface, disguised as natural crevices, to keep air flowing even dozens of feet below ground. Water wells tapped into underground streams, ensuring survival during long sieges. Even the entrances were masterclasses in design, with massive stone wheels that could roll into place to block invaders, silent sentinels built right into the rock. This wasn't just convenience, it was necessity. Cappadocia's geology didn't just make these cities possible, it made them practical. In a world where enemies could appear on the horizon without warning, where armies swept across the land like storms, the ability to vanish underground wasn't just clever, it was life-saving. And that's why you won't find structures like these carved into granite or limestone elsewhere. It had to be tough, it had to be Cappadocia. The land didn't just shape these cities, it dictated their very existence. One of the most compelling explanations for Cappadocia's underground cities lies in the constant threat of invasion. Picture a crossroads where empires clashed, Persians sweeping in from the east, Romans advancing from the west, and later, Arab forces pushing northward. Cappadocia sat right in the middle, a fertile region caught between warring powers. When armies marched through, the people here needed more than walls to protect them. They needed to disappear. That's where the underground cities came in. These weren't just hiding spots, they were carefully engineered fortresses designed to outlast sieges and outsmart invaders. Take those massive circular stone doors you'll find at key passageways. Weighing hundreds of pounds, they could be rolled into place in moments, sealing off entire sections of the city. But here's what's ingenious: they were carved from the same rock as the tunnels, blending seamlessly when closed. An invading force might walk right past one without realizing an entire community was hidden just beyond it. And if enemies did manage to break through, the narrow, winding tunnels forced them to move single file, turning their numbers from an advantage into a liability. Defenders could pick them off one by one from hidden niches in the walls, but survival wasn't just about keeping invaders out, it was about sustaining life inside. Some of these cities could shelter thousands for months at a time. How deep wells tapped into underground water sources, while clever ventilation shafts, disguised as natural fissures, brought fresh air to even the lowest levels. Storage chambers held grains, dried meats, and fermented goods, while designated areas housed livestock. Families could retreat underground with their animals, tools, and even their wine. Archaeologists have uncovered entire wineries carved into the rock. The scale of these cities tells us they were more than temporary panic rooms. Passages connect multiple levels with communal kitchens, churches, and meeting halls, suggesting long-term habitation. Some scholars believe certain tunnels may have linked different underground settlements, creating a secret network beneath Cappadocia's surface. Imagine fleeing invaders by day and emerging at night to tend hidden fields, a life of calculated resilience. What's striking is how these designs repeat across multiple cities, hinting at shared knowledge passed down through generations. Each new wave of threats, whether from Persians, Byzantines, or Arab armies, likely refined the techniques. The underground cities became a living blueprint for survival, adapted over centuries. They stand as proof that when faced with overwhelming force, human ingenuity doesn't retreat, it digs deeper. While the threat of invasion explains part of Cappadocia's underground story, there's another layer to this mystery, one etched into the very walls of these hidden chambers. Look closely and you'll find crosses, biblical scenes, and other religious symbols carved into the rock, silent witnesses to a time when faith itself was a dangerous thing. These markings point to a second compelling theory, that early Christians fleeing Roman persecution transformed these underground spaces into secret sanctuaries. Cappadocia sits at a fascinating crossroads, not just geographically but spiritually. By the 4th century, this region had become a haven for Christians, especially as the Roman Empire's persecution intensified. Imagine practicing a forbidden faith, knowing discovery could mean imprisonment or worse. Where do you gather to worship? Where do you hide when soldiers come knocking? The answer lay beneath your feet. Unlike crude caves, these underground cities offered something extraordinary. Spaces designed not just for survival, but for sacred life. Archaeologists have identified rooms with vaulted ceilings, niches that likely held religious icons, and even baptismal fonts, all suggesting these weren't merely hideouts but clandestine churches. Some of the most striking evidence comes from the Gurim Valley, where entire underground complexes feature frescoes of saints and biblical stories, painted in vivid colors that have endured for centuries. These weren't rushed doodles but carefully crafted artworks created by people who clearly intended to stay, and the symbolism runs deeper. The layout of certain chambers mirrors traditional church designs, with a central nave and side aisles, while ventilation shafts double as light wells, allowing sunlight to filter down during daytime services. It's as if the very architecture whispered defiance, a faith that refused to be buried, even underground. What's remarkable is how these spaces balanced secrecy with community. Hidden passages connected living quarters to worship areas, allowing families to move unseen between daily life and religious practice. Storerooms held supplies for communal meals, echoing the early Christian tradition of agape feasts. Even the city's defensive features took on spiritual significance. Those massive rolling stone doors didn't just block invaders. They became metaphors, like the stone rolled away from Christ's tomb. Every element served dual purposes, blending survival with symbolism. Not all scholars agree on the extent of Christian use. Some argue these spaces were multifunctional, adapting to different threats over time. But the sheer volume of religious art suggests these weren't just emergency shelters. They were places where identity was preserved, where rituals could continue uninterrupted, generation after generation. In a world where faith was punishable by death, the underground cities offered something priceless, not just safety, but the freedom to believe. But there's another way to look at these underground wonders, not just as hideouts or sacred spaces, but as bustling centers of commerce. Picture a merchant in ancient Cappadocia, standing in a cavernous underground chamber, surrounded by towering clay jars filled with wine, grain, and olive oil. The air is cool and dry, perfect for preserving goods that would spoil under the scorching sun. This wasn't just a refuge, it was a warehouse, a marketplace hidden beneath the earth. Some researchers believe these cities played a crucial role in regional trade, acting as secure storage hubs along the Silk Road's lesser-known branches. The logic is compelling. Underground temperatures in Cappadocia hover around a constant 55 degrees Fahrenheit, nature's perfect pantry. Unlike surface storerooms vulnerable to raids or spoilage, these chambers kept wine from turning to vinegar, grain from molding, and precious spices from losing their potency. Archaeologists have uncovered vast rooms lined with storage pits and shelves, some large enough to hold supplies for hundreds of people, and it wasn't just about hoarding resources. The layout suggests efficiency, narrow tunnels leading to centralized distribution points, like an ancient version of a warehouse's loading dock. What's even more intriguing are the connections between these underground networks and the trade routes above. Some tunnels stretch toward known caravan stops, hinting at a covert system for moving goods. Imagine merchants discreetly funneling silk, spices, or silver through these passageways, avoiding bandits or heavy taxes on surface roads. The city's defensive features would have doubled as security for valuable cargo, those massive rolling doors keeping out thieves as effectively as armies. Then there's the wine. Cappadocia's volcanic soil was famous for its vineyards, and underground, archaeologists have found carved vats, presses, and fermentation rooms. These weren't just for local use. Wine was a high-value trade commodity. Stored underground, it could age for years, increasing its worth. Some tunnels even sloped gently, possibly to guide spilled liquids away, a detail that speaks to large-scale production. The debate continues. Were these cities primarily built for trade, or did they adapt to it over time? Either way, their design reveals a versatility that's astonishing. A single chamber might have served as a chapel one day, a grain storehouse the next, and a fallout shelter during invasions. This wasn't just architecture, it was a survival strategy written in stone, proving that in Cappadocia, the line between sanctuary and marketplace was as fluid as the tunnels themselves. Now consider this: what if the underground cities of Cappadocia weren't just about hiding from enemies or safeguarding faith, but about something far more basic, surviving the elements themselves? The region's climate swings between extremes, with summer temperatures soaring above 100 degrees Fahrenheit and winter nights plunging below freezing. Above ground, life would have been a constant battle against the weather, but step below the surface and something remarkable happens. The Earth acts like a natural thermostat, keeping temperatures steady around 55 degrees year-round. That's the kind of stability that doesn't just make life bearable, it makes it thrive. The design of these cities reveals an intimate understanding of this balance. Ventilation shafts weren't just emergency features, they were precision tools for climate control. Carved at careful angles, they allowed hot air to rise out in summer while drawing in cooler air, and in winter, they could be partially blocked to retain warmth. Some shafts even had small openings at the surface, disguised to blend with the rocky landscape, ensuring airflow without exposing inhabitants to the elements. It's a system so effective that modern engineers still study it for passive cooling techniques. Then there's the matter of daily life. Unlike cramped emergency shelters, these cities had designated spaces for cooking, sleeping, and storage, all arranged to maximize comfort. Kitchens were often placed near ventilation shafts to carry smoke upward, while living quarters nestled deeper in the rock retained heat during cold nights. Water channels carved into floors prevented dampness, and niches in walls held oil lamps that provided light without overheating the space. These aren't the hallmarks of temporary refuge, they're the signatures of a society that planned to stay. Archaeological clues support this theory. At Derinkuyu, one of the deepest underground cities, researchers found evidence of livestock pens, wine presses, and even communal ovens, infrastructure that suggests sustained, organized living. Grain storage pits were designed to keep harvests edible for years, not just seasons, and perhaps most telling, the wear patterns on staircases and doorways show consistent, long-term use, polished smooth by generations of footsteps. Could these cities have been the ancient equivalent of climate-resilient architecture? Imagine a community that didn't just endure the weather but engineered around it, turning the earth itself into a shield against nature's extremes. In a land where survival above ground meant battling the skies, going underground might not have been a last resort, but the smartest choice anyone could make. Among the more mysterious theories surrounding Cappadocia's underground cities is the idea that they served as hidden sanctuaries for secret societies, places where ancient rituals unfolded far from prying eyes. Walk through certain chambers and you'll notice carvings that defy easy explanation. Strange symbols etched into walls, niches aligned with celestial patterns, and odd recesses that don't match typical storage or living spaces. These anomalies have fueled speculation that these tunnels weren't just for survival or trade, but for something far more enigmatic. Could they have been meeting grounds for mystery schools, where initiates gathered to guard esoteric knowledge? Take the peculiar circular chambers found in some deeper levels. Unlike the rectangular rooms used for storage or worship, these spaces feature concentric rings carved into the floors, almost like ancient gathering spots where participants might have sat in ritual circles. Some alternative historians point to similar designs in known mystical sites, like the underground oracle chambers of the Mediterranean. Then there are the ventilation shafts, which some researchers argue align with solstice sunrises, funneling beams of light into specific niches at precise times of the year. Whether coincidence or intentional, these details hint at a layer of purpose beyond mere practicality. Theories about Cappadocia's connection to secret groups often tie into broader legends of the region. Some link these spaces to early Christian Gnostic sects, who supposedly met in secrecy to preserve teachings suppressed by the mainstream church. Others whisper of pre-Christian traditions, suggesting the cities were repurposed from even older pagan rites. A handful of carvings depict figures with raised hands or unusual headdresses, open to interpretation as priests, shamans, or participants in forgotten ceremonies. Of course, mainstream archaeology urges caution. Without written records, it's impossible to confirm whether these features held spiritual significance or simply served mundane functions lost to time. But the persistence of these theories speaks to something deeper, our fascination with the unknown. The very obscurity of these spaces invites wonder. In a world where so much ancient history is neatly catalogued, Cappadocia's underground cities remain deliciously unresolved, their shadows still holding secrets we may never fully decipher. Long before crosses were carved into Cappadocia's underground walls, another civilization left its mark, one that shaped this region over 3,000 years ago. The Hittites, a formidable Bronze Age empire, ruled these lands with an iron grip, and their legacy might hold the key to the earliest layers of the underground cities. Picture a time when chariots rattled across Cappadocia's plains and massive stone lions guarded temple gates above ground, while below the first tunnels may have been taking shape. What makes the Hittite connection so compelling is their reputation as master builders. Their capital, Hattusa, boasted monumental walls and hidden tunnels, suggesting they understood the strategic value of subterranean spaces. Archaeologists have found Hittite-era artifacts in some of Cappadocia's deeper chambers: clay tablets, distinctive pottery shards, even tools that match those used in their quarries. These aren't random leftovers, they're clues pointing to deliberate construction. The Hittites faced constant threats from rival kingdoms to internal rebellions, and their response was ingenuity. Some scholars believe they pioneered the concept of underground refuges here, carving out initial storage areas and escape routes that later generations expanded. Imagine a Hittite garrison retreating through a disguised entrance, rolling a stone slab behind them as enemies searched in vain above. This wasn't just practicality, it was psychological warfare vanishing into the earth like ghosts. But the real question isn't just whether the Hittites built here, it's how their work influenced what came after. Their tunnels often followed natural volcanic tubes, reinforcing walls with the same techniques seen in later Christian expansions. Even the iconic rolling stone doors have precursors in Hittite architecture. It's as if they created a blueprint that others refined over centuries, each civilization adding its own layer to the underground puzzle. Not everyone agrees. Some argue the Hittites used shallow caves for storage, not habitation, and that the true cities emerged later. Yet the overlap in design is hard to ignore. At sites like Kamakli, lower levels show stonework distinct from upper chambers, rougher, older, echoing Hittite methods. Like whispers from the past, these details suggest the underground cities weren't built in one era, but grown like rings in a tree with the Hittites at the very core. Whether they dug the first tunnels or simply inspired those who did, their shadow lingers in Cappadocia's depths. To walk these passages is to tread on buried history, where a Hittite hand might have once chiseled the rock, not knowing how far their legacy would reach. The sheer scale of Cappadocia's underground cities becomes even more astonishing when you consider how they were built not with cranes and drills, but with simple hand tools and human ingenuity. Picture teams of workers chiseling away at the soft volcanic rock, descending deeper with each passing day, their only guides being experience and necessity. They didn't carve outward like miners digging for ore. They worked vertically, top-down, removing material floor by floor like sculptors revealing a statue hidden in stone. This counterintuitive approach, building downward instead of upward, required meticulous planning. One wrong move could weaken an entire level, yet somehow, these ancient engineers created stable, multi-story structures that have stood for centuries. The tools they used were surprisingly basic: picks, chisels, hammers, and possibly wooden wedges soaked in water to split the rock, but the techniques, nothing short of genius. Workers likely started with a central shaft, then branched out horizontally to create rooms and tunnels, leaving thick pillars of untouched stone to support the ceilings. The walls weren't just flat surfaces, they were often slightly curved, a subtle design choice that distributed weight more evenly and prevented collapses. And here's the clincher: they did it all without precise measuring instruments. Instead, they relied on shadows from oil lamps or sunlight filtering through ventilation shafts to gauge depth and alignment. Speaking of ventilation, those shafts are masterpieces in themselves, carved narrow at the surface to disguise their purpose. They widened as they descended, creating natural airflow. Some extended over 200 feet down, maintaining oxygen levels even in the deepest chambers. The builders understood fluid dynamics long before the science had a name. Angled shafts drew stale air upward while pulling fresh air inward, a passive system so effective that modern architects still study it. Water was another puzzle solved with elegance. Wells weren't just holes in the ground. They tapped into underground aquifers through precisely calculated angles. Channels carved into floors directed condensation and waste away from living spaces, while storage cisterns lined with waterproof clay kept reserves safe from contamination. Perhaps most impressive were the safety features: rolling stone doors, some weighing over a ton, balanced perfectly on pivot stones so a single person could move them. Narrow passageways had steps of varying heights to trip up invaders, while hidden escape routes crisscrossed like secret highways. Every detail served multiple purposes: defense, climate control, sustainability. How did they coordinate such complex projects without written plans? The answer might lie in apprenticeship. Knowledge was likely passed down through generations, with each builder adding refinements. The consistency across cities suggests a shared rulebook of techniques, an ancient engineering tradition etched not on parchment, but in stone itself. What we see today isn't just architecture. It's the physical manifestation of human problem solving, a testament to what can be achieved when necessity and creativity collide. The security measures in Cappadocia's underground cities weren't just effective, they were downright ingenious. Those massive circular stone doors you've heard about. They were only the beginning. Picture an invader managing to squeeze past one, only to find themselves in a narrow corridor barely wider than their shoulders, forcing them to advance sideways like a crab. Now imagine defenders waiting just around a blind corner, armed with spears or boiling oil, picking off intruders one by one. The entire layout was a masterclass in asymmetrical warfare. turning every architectural choice into a tactical advantage. Some passageways took this deception even further. Archaeologists have discovered tunnels that appear to lead somewhere important only to abruptly end in solid rock. These weren't mistakes, they were deliberate traps. An enemy chasing fleeing townsfolk would suddenly find themselves in a dead end, giving defenders precious moments to regroup or launch a counterattack from hidden side passages. Other corridors looped back on themselves in dizzying spirals, designed to disorient anyone unfamiliar with the maze. Even the staircases played tricks. Uneven steps alternated between shallow and deep, causing pursuers to stumble while residents who knew the rhythm moved swiftly in the dark. But the real stroke of brilliance, the communication system, small holes no wider than a fist, pierced certain walls at strategic intervals. These weren't ventilation shafts, they were ancient intercoms. A whisper into one end could travel dozens of feet, allowing defenders to relay warnings or coordinate movements without alerting invaders. Some tunnels even featured grooves in the floors, possibly for rolling boulders or pouring liquids to slow attackers. Every inch of these cities was engineered to give the upper hand to those who called them home. Perhaps most chilling are the so-called suicide corridors, passages where the ceiling gradually lowers until it's impossible to stand upright. Forced to crawl, invaders would find themselves utterly vulnerable, unable to wield weapons or raise shields, while defenders could strike from hidden alcoves above. It's a reminder that these weren't just hiding places, they were carefully calibrated killing grounds, designed by people who understood the brutal mathematics of survival. Yet amid all these defensive horrors, there's a curious tenderness too. Tiny niches carved at child height suggest places where young ones could hide during attacks. Smooth patches on walls mark where hands rested during long vigils. These cities weren't just about death, they were about preserving life at all costs. Every trap, every trick, every hidden turn speaks to a single truth. The people who built this underworld weren't just trying to survive. They were determined to outthink, outlast, and ultimately outlive whatever chaos raged above. Living in Cappadocia's underground cities wasn't just about survival. It was about creating a sense of normalcy in the most extraordinary conditions. Picture a typical day beneath the earth. Families waking in cool, lamp-lit chambers, the scent of baking bread drifting from communal ovens while children practiced letters on smooth clay tablets in makeshift schools. These weren't dark, claustrophobic holes. They were vibrant spaces where life unfolded with surprising familiarity. Archaeologists have uncovered everything from stone dining tables to weaving looms, proving that people didn't just endure this environment, they thrived in it. Take something as simple as light. Without sunlight, the inhabitants relied on oil lamps, hundreds of them. Carved niches in the walls held these lamps at precise intervals, their flickering flames reflecting off polished rock to amplify the glow. The soot patterns on ceilings tell us exactly where lamps were placed most frequently, mapping out activity hubs like ancient blueprints. In larger chambers, reflective metals or polished stones may have been used to bounce light deeper into the tunnels, a primitive but effective form of indoor lighting. Food preparation reveals another layer of ingenuity. Central kitchens featured raised hearths with flues that funneled smoke upward through ventilation shafts, preventing suffocation in windowless spaces. Grain grinders, olive presses, and even cheese-making tools suggest a diverse diet. Some cities had specialized areas for fermenting wine and beer, proof that even underground, people found ways to enjoy life's small pleasures. Social bonds were maintained through shared spaces. Circular chambers with bench-like seating likely served as gathering spots for storytelling or communal meals. At Derinkuyu, one deep chamber's acoustics are so precise that a whisper at its center can be heard throughout the room, perfect for announcements or religious ceremonies. Even the stables were integrated thoughtfully, with ramps allowing animals to be led to lower levels, their body heat helping warm living areas during winter. But life underground wasn't without challenges. The absence of sunlight meant vitamin D deficiencies, evidenced by skeletal remains showing signs of rickets. Yet carvings depict people gardening in hidden surface plots, suggesting they balanced subterranean living with brief daylight excursions. Personal items found in the ruins, combs, jewelry, children's toys, speak to a determination to maintain dignity and identity. A bronze ring might seem insignificant until you realize its owner chose to wear it not for others to see, but to remember who they were in the darkness. The most touching details are often the smallest: a smoothed section of wall where someone rested their hand daily, a game board scratched into stone. These weren't just shelters, they were homes. Every artifact whispers the same truth. Humanity's greatest skill isn't just surviving adversity, it's carving out moments of normalcy, no matter how deep you have to dig. Derinkuyu isn't just another underground city, it's the grand cathedral of subterranean living, a labyrinth that plunges deeper than any other, with chambers stacked like layers of an ancient wedding cake. At 18 stories down, this isn't some cramped hideaway. It's a vertical metropolis capable of sheltering 20,000 people, complete with every necessity for long-term survival. Walk its passages and you'll find chapels with vaulted ceilings, their walls still bearing faint traces of frescoes, storerooms the size of banquet halls, lined with pits that once held enough grain to feed multitudes. There's even evidence of a missionary school. Imagine children reciting scriptures by lamplight, their voices echoing through stone corridors. This wasn't built in panic. It was planned with precision, suggesting Derinkuyu wasn't just a refuge but a thriving underground capital. What sets Derinkuyu apart isn't just its depth but its sophistication. A single ventilation shaft nearly 300 feet tall acted like a giant chimney, pulling fresh air down to the lowest levels while expelling stale air upward. Engineers today marvel at its design. The shaft isn't straight, but slightly curved to prevent debris or enemies from dropping projectiles down. Water wells tapped into underground rivers, their mouths narrow to avoid contamination, while heavy stone wheels sealed off entire neighborhoods at a moment's notice. And then there's the missionary school, a series of chambers with bench-like seating and a central podium, where scholars likely taught theology, languages, and even astronomy using light shafts as celestial calendars. The scale of Derinkuyu raises a tantalizing question. Why go so big? Most underground cities were designed for temporary shelter, but this one feels permanent. Some historians believe it served as a regional command center during crises, a place where leaders could coordinate defenses while the population sheltered in smaller, connected cities nearby. Others point to its strategic location near trade routes, suggesting it doubled as a secure warehouse for goods moving between empires. The most compelling theory, though, ties back to faith. Derinkuyu's abundance of chapels and its missionary school hint at a deeper purpose, not just hiding Christians, but nurturing their identity. This may have been a sacred stronghold, where rituals and knowledge were preserved even as persecution raged above ground. Yet for all its grandeur, Derinkuyu holds mysteries that refuse neat explanations. Odd circular chambers with no obvious purpose, their walls marked with symbols that predate Christianity. Tunnels that slope abruptly, leading nowhere, or at least nowhere we've discovered yet. Then there's the eerie silence of its lowest levels where the air grows still and the rock seems to swallow sound. Were these spaces used for secret rituals, emergency escapes, or something we haven't even considered? What's undeniable is Derinkuyu's sheer audacity. It's a monument to human resilience, yes, but also to ambition. Whoever carved this city didn't just dig to survive, they dug to dominate the darkness, turning it into a world of its own. Walking its passages today, you don't just see history, you feel it, the weight of countless lives lived in shadow, the echoes of a civilization that refused to be erased. While Derinkuyu impressed with its dizzying depth, Kaymakli tells a different story, one written sideways instead of down. Spread across 4 sprawling levels, this underground city favors breadth over height, its chambers fanning outward like roots from a tree. Step inside, and you immediately notice the organizational genius at work. Stables dominate the upper floors, their stone troughs and tethering rings still visible, while human living spaces unfold below. This deliberate separation speaks volumes. Unlike Derinkuyu's vertical density, Kaymakli's layout suggests a community that prioritized efficiency, keeping animals close to fresh air while reserving deeper, more insulated spaces for families. The stables themselves are marvels of practicality. Wide, circular rooms with low ceilings perfect for livestock feature grooves in the floors to channel waste away, while ventilation shafts angled toward the surface prevented dangerous methane buildup. Archaeologists have counted space for hundreds of animals, suggesting Kaymakli wasn't just sheltering people, but their economic lifelines too. Descend to the second level, and the atmosphere shifts. Here, wine presses and storage vats line the walls, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of use. The presence of such specialized areas implies Kaymakli wasn't merely a wartime hideout, but a functioning settlement where daily life continued uninterrupted for months or even years. What truly sets Kaymakli apart, though, is its communal infrastructure. A vast central chamber on the 3rd level, accessible via multiple tunnels, seems designed for gatherings, its floor plan echoing ancient meeting halls found in above-ground Hittite ruins. Nearby, a complex network of narrow corridors connects to residential quarters, each family unit featuring carved niches for lamps, shelving, and even small alcoves that may have served as privacy screens. The attention to social cohesion is striking. While Derinkuyu's vertical design emphasized security and secrecy, Kaymakli's horizontal sprawl fostered connectivity, with shared kitchens and communal ovens placed at strategic junctions to serve clusters of dwellings. Then there's the mystery of the 4th level, a shadowy realm of unfinished tunnels and abruptly ending passages. Some researchers believe these were expansion projects, abandoned when threats diminished or populations shifted. Others point to tool marks suggesting hurried excavation, possibly during an impending attack. The most intriguing theory, that these lower tunnels were deliberately left incomplete as decoys, meant to confuse invaders who breached the upper defenses. Whatever the truth, the contrast with Derinkuyu's polished depths is stark. Where one city plunges with purpose, the other spreads with adaptability. 2 solutions to the same existential threats, carved from the same rock, yet worlds apart in philosophy. Perhaps the greatest clue to Kaymakli's unique role lies in its location. Situated along a key trade route, it may have functioned as a secure way station, where merchants could shelter goods and livestock during unstable times. The abundance of storage spaces, some large enough to hold entire caravans worth of cargo, supports this idea. Unlike Derinkuyu's focus on permanent refuge, Kaymakli feels designed for fluidity, welcoming transient populations alongside long-term residents. That duality makes it a fascinating counterpoint, not just a hiding place, but a hub where commerce and community persisted beneath the surface. proving that safety and survival could take many forms in Cappadocia's underground world. Even after decades of exploration, Cappadocia's underground world still guards its deepest secrets. Archaeologists estimate that less than half of the known subterranean cities have been fully mapped, and those are just the ones we've found. Every few years, a farmer's plow sinks unexpectedly into soft earth, revealing yet another hidden entrance. Construction crews breaking ground for new roads stumble upon tunnels snaking beneath their blueprints. These aren't isolated incidents. They're reminders that what we've uncovered so far might just be the surface of something far grander. Take the 2014 discovery near Nevşehir, where ground-penetrating radar revealed a vast, previously unknown complex beneath a modern apartment block. Initial scans showed at least 7 levels descending into the earth, with ventilation shafts and water channels mirroring those in Derinkuyu and Kaymakli, except this city appeared even older. Pottery fragments pulled from its upper layers dated back to the Hittite era, suggesting it could rewrite the timeline of underground construction entirely. Yet 12 years later, only a fraction has been excavated, slowed by the painstaking work of reinforcing unstable passages and preserving delicate artifacts. What's astonishing isn't just the scale of these undiscovered spaces, but what they might reveal about connectivity. Groundwater seepage patterns and sonar imaging hint at something revolutionary. Long, narrow tunnels possibly linking separate cities into a subterranean network stretching across Cappadocia. Imagine fleeing invaders by traveling miles underground, emerging in a different settlement entirely, a Bronze Age metro system for survival. Recent thermal scans near Gurim support this theory, detecting hollow spaces behind walls in excavated areas, like hidden arteries waiting to be unsealed. The implications are staggering. Each new chamber shifts our understanding of these cities' purpose. A room filled with loom weights and spindle walls found in 2019 challenged the assumption that only essential activities took place underground. Here was evidence of textile production on an almost industrial scale. Another discovery the following year uncovered a chamber lined with peculiar acoustic properties, where a single clap reverberates for nearly 10 seconds. Was it a council chamber, a ritual space, or something else entirely? Technology is both a blessing and a curse in this hunt. While LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar expose hidden voids without digging, they also create dilemmas. Should archaeologists disturb pristine sites when exposure to air could fade fragile frescoes or crumble ancient tools? Some argue for leaving certain areas untouched, their secrets preserved for future generations with better preservation techniques. Others counter that climate change and urban expansion make time a luxury we don't have. One thing's certain, every trowel scrape into Cappadocia's soil risks rewriting history. A single overlooked passage might lead to the motherlode, a library of clay tablets, a royal cache, or even artwork that finally explains who these builders truly were. Until then, the underground keeps its mysteries close, whispering through the cracks in the rock, waiting for the next explorer to listen. By the time the Byzantine Empire rose to power, Cappadocia's underground cities had already sheltered generations, but now they faced a new chapter. Arab armies surged across the region in the 7th and 8th centuries, raiding Byzantine territories with relentless force. In response, these labyrinthine retreats transformed from occasional hideouts into fully integrated military assets. Byzantine chronicles mention them explicitly, noting how governors stockpiled supplies underground and trained local militias to exploit the tunnel's defensive advantages. This wasn't just passive refuge, it was organized warfare waged from the shadows. The Byzantines didn't merely occupy these spaces, they upgraded them. Archaeologists have identified distinct modifications from this era. reinforced ceilings with arched supports modeled after Byzantine siege architecture, and cisterns lined with waterproof mortar typical of imperial engineering. Some tunnels were widened to allow quicker troop movements, while new staircases linked previously isolated levels, turning fragmented chambers into cohesive strongholds. Most telling are the communication shafts now equipped with metal grills, an innovation that allowed messages to be passed securely between levels while blocking enemy projectiles. These weren't random tweaks, they reflected Byzantine military doctrine, which prized adaptability and layered defense. Religious life underground also flourished under Byzantine rule. As Arab incursions threatened surface monasteries, monks retreated below, carving oratories adorned with crosses and icons into the soft rock. At Erzkanak, one chamber's walls bear faint red pigments, traces of a fresco depicting Saint George, a favorite Byzantine military saint. The symbolism is potent, even underground, faith and resistance intertwined. Meanwhile, hidden scriptoria likely produced copies of religious texts, preserving theology amid turmoil. Yet the Byzantines' greatest contribution might have been institutional. Tax records from the period show exemptions for communities maintaining underground defenses, proving how central these cities were to imperial strategy. Local garrisons were tasked with keeping escape tunnels clear, while farmers received subsidies to store surplus grain in subterranean silos. This bureaucratic embrace elevated the cities from local shelters to components of a broader defensive network, a medieval version of hardened bunkers. Debates persist about how extensively the Byzantines expanded the complexes. Some scholars point to tunnels with tool marks matching Byzantine-era chisels, suggesting new excavations. Others argue they simply repurposed older layers like the Hittite galleries for contemporary needs. Either way, their legacy is undeniable. Walk certain passageways today, and you'll spot grooves where Byzantine-era doors once slid shut, or niches designed to hold the distinctive oil lamps of their garrisons. These subtle fingerprints reveal an empire that didn't just hide in the earth, it weaponized it. What's often overlooked is how this era blurred the line between civilian and soldier. Farmers trained to fight in confined spaces, priests who doubled as messengers, children taught to navigate pitch-black corridors. The underground cities became crucibles of communal resilience. When Arab chroniclers wrote of attacking Cappadocian villages only to find them eerily empty, they weren't just describing stealth. They were witnessing the culmination of Byzantine ingenuity, a population that could vanish like smoke, then reappear to strike when least expected. In Cappadocia's depths, survival wasn't just an art, it was a siegecraft. Legends swirl around Cappadocia's underground cities like mist over the valleys at dawn. Local storytellers whisper of towering figures who carved these chambers in a single night, giants with stone fingers, or gods displeased by human arrogance. Other tales speak of a vanished race, technologically advanced but doomed by their own hubris, leaving behind these hollowed mountains as their only legacy. While archaeologists roll their eyes at such notions, there's something revealing about how persistently these myths endure. They're not just fanciful stories, they're the human mind grappling with the sheer improbability of what ordinary people achieved with simple tools and extraordinary determination. Consider the recurring motif of giants in regional folklore. When faced with doorways 10 feet tall or ventilation shafts perfectly straight despite plunging hundreds of feet downward, it's almost instinctive to imagine superhuman builders. The truth that generations of families chipped away at the rock inch by inch feels somehow less satisfying than the idea of mythical beings wielding supernatural strength. Yet these legends do more than entertain. They encode a deeper truth about how ancient societies viewed their own past. By attributing the cities to gods or giants, storytellers acknowledge that their ancestors' accomplishments were so monumental, they bordered on the divine. Then there are the murkier tales linking the tunnels to lost civilizations like Atlantis or the Hittites' shadowy predecessors. Some alternative historians point to precise astronomical alignments in certain shafts or the eerie similarity between Cappadocia's subterranean layouts and ancient cave systems in distant lands. Never mind that mainstream scholars dismiss such connections, the very act of speculating reveals our longing for these spaces to be part of some grander, hidden narrative. It's as if we can't bear the thought that something so astonishing might have ordinary origins. What's fascinating is how these myths evolve with each generation. Modern versions sometimes cast the underground cities as alien bases or repositories of esoteric knowledge, reflecting contemporary obsessions just as older tales mirrored ancient fears. A farmer in the 1950s might have crossed himself while speaking of jinn haunting the lower tunnels, while a present-day tour guide might wink and mention energy vortexes to wide-eyed visitors. The stories shift, but their function remains the same, to fill the gaps where history falls silent. Perhaps the most poignant folklore surrounds the city's abandonment. Some say a great bell rings faintly in the deepest chambers, calling the faithful back when danger returns. Others tell of spectral lanterns flickering in sealed-off passages, guiding lost souls to forgotten treasures. These aren't just ghost stories, they're cultural memory in poetic form, preserving the trauma of communities forced to flee their subterranean havens when surface wars finally ended. The irony, of course, is that the reality is more extraordinary than any myth. No giants could rival the collective effort of thousands carving a civilization from the living rock. No lost technology matches the ingenuity of ventilation shafts that function for centuries without a single gear or pulley. These cities don't need legends to be awe-inspiring. Their true story of resilience, cooperation, and quiet brilliance is miraculous enough. Yet the persistence of these tales reminds us that some human achievements are so profound, they demand to be retold as epics, even when the facts are staggering on their own. Cappadocia's underground cities are breathtaking, but they're not the only subterranean wonders carved by human hands. Across the globe, from Jordan's rose-red cliffs to the bone-lined tunnels beneath Paris, other civilizations have dug into the earth for shelter, worship, or burial. Yet none come close to matching the sheer ambition of Cappadocia's hidden metropolises. Take Petra, for instance. Its famous rock-cut facades and tombs are architectural marvels, but its underground spaces are limited to cisterns and a few cramped chambers. The Nabateans built for spectacle above ground, not survival below it. Even the vast catacombs of Paris, with their miles of tunnels housing the remains of 6 million people, served a single purpose: storing the dead. They lack the multi-functionality of Cappadocia's cities, where every corridor and chamber was designed for living, working, and worshipping in defiance of the world above. What truly sets Cappadocia apart is its verticality. While most underground networks sprawl horizontally, these cities plunge downward like inverted skyscrapers. Derinkuyu's 18 levels dwarf the 3 or 4 found in ancient underground sites like Malta's Hypogeum or Turkey's own Mardin caves. That depth wasn't just for show, it was strategic. The deeper you went, the safer you were from surface threats, whether invading armies or scorching summers. And unlike the claustrophobic catacombs of Rome, where narrow passages force single-file movement, Cappadocia's tunnels open into expansive communal spaces, kitchens with ventilation chimneys, stables with troughs, even wineries with fermentation vats. This wasn't just digging holes, it was engineering an entire inverted civilization. Then there's the question of scale. Modern estimates suggest Cappadocia's interconnected cities could shelter up to 100,000 people at their peak, a number unmatched by any other known underground complex. Compare that to Beijing's Dixia Cheng, a Cold War-era bunker system built to house 10,000, or the ancient underground villages of China's lowest plateau, which accommodated mere hundreds. Even Turkey's own underground sites, like the caves of Mardin, lack the intricate ventilation and water systems that made Cappadocia's cities self-sustaining. Those towering air shafts weren't just holes in the rock, they were precision-engineered to create airflow across hundreds of feet, a feat unmatched until the industrial age. But perhaps the most striking difference lies in adaptability. While places like Budapest's underground hospitals or the tunnels of Vietnam's Khu Khai were built for specific, temporary purposes, Cappadocia's cities evolved over millennia. Hittite escape tunnels became Byzantine strongholds, which in turn sheltered persecuted Christians, each generation adding new layers, both literally and figuratively. The result wasn't a frozen relic, but a living, evolving testament to human resilience. Walking these passages today, you're not just stepping through history, you're tracing the blueprint of a society that refused to be crushed, no matter what the surface world threw at it. That's what makes Cappadocia's underground not just unique, but unforgettable. While invasions and religious persecution dominate discussions of Cappadocia's underground cities, another force may have driven people beneath the earth, one far quieter but just as relentless: climate change. Imagine a time when rains grew scarce, rivers dwindled to trickles, and crops withered under an unrelenting sun. Above ground, survival became a daily struggle, while below, the earth offered a stable refuge. Some researchers now argue that environmental pressures, particularly prolonged droughts, played a pivotal role in the rise of these subterranean settlements. Unlike sudden attacks from armies, climate shifts unfolded over generations, forcing communities to adapt or perish, and adaptation here meant mastering life underground. The evidence lies in the city's ingenious water systems. Deep wells tapped into underground aquifers, bypassing dried-up surface sources. Carved channels collected every precious drop of condensation from the cool cave walls, funneling it into cisterns lined with waterproof clay. Even the famous ventilation shafts doubled as water harvesters, their angled designs capturing nighttime dew. These weren't just emergency measures, they were long-term solutions to a changing environment. In a region where rainfall could vanish for years, the underground cities became lifeboats, their inhabitants riding out ecological storms in the planet's natural pantry. Soil studies add weight to this theory. Sediment cores from Cappadocia show layers of dust and mineral deposits consistent with arid periods around the time the cities expanded most rapidly. Pollen samples reveal shifts from oak and pine to drought-resistant shrubs, painting a picture of landscapes growing harsher. Meanwhile, the city's storage chambers tell their own story. Grain pits large enough to hold harvests for a decade, their walls charred to repel insects. This wasn't just preparation for siege, it was insurance against failing rains. What's fascinating is how these climate adaptations mirror those of other ancient civilizations, yet with a uniquely Cappadocian twist. While the Nabateans built surface dams and the ancestral Pueblones crafted clay-lined reservoirs, the people here turned inward, using the earth itself as a regulator. The rock's thermal mass kept temperatures steady even as surface weather grew erratic. Underground, a family could bake bread without sweltering, sleep without shivering, and store food without spoilage. In essence, they hacked the planet's natural systems to outmaneuver a shifting climate, an innovation that feels eerily relevant today. The climate theory doesn't negate other explanations, it layers onto them. A community fleeing invaders might only stay underground for weeks, but one escaping drought would need to last years. That difference explains the city's staggering depth and self-sufficiency. Churches, schools, and wineries weren't luxuries, they were the architecture of a society settling in for the long haul. Even the livestock pens make sense when you consider herds brought underground to protect them from vanishing pastures. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in the city's abandonment. As the climate stabilized around the 10th century, many tunnels fell into disuse. Coincidence or proof that when the rains returned, people simply walked away from the darkness? The answer may be written in the dust itself, a silent testament to humanity's oldest struggle, not against empires or ideologies, but against the sky itself. The walls of Cappadocia's underground cities tell stories in stone and pigment crosses etched with care, saints painted in faded ochre and lapis, biblical scenes unfolding across vaulted ceilings. These artworks aren't mere decorations, they're windows into the spiritual lives of those who sought refuge below. Take the frescoes in the Gurim Valley's hidden chapels, figures with solemn eyes and outstretched hands, their colors still vibrant after centuries in the dark. Some depict Christ Pantocrator, a Byzantine emblem of divine authority, while others show the Virgin Mary cradling the infant Jesus, images that would have been dangerous to display openly during periods of persecution. The very act of carving these sacred scenes into living rock feels like defiance, a declaration that faith couldn't be buried, no matter how deep the darkness. But look closer and the details reveal deeper layers of meaning. In Derinkuyu's lower levels, a niche carved beside a baptismal font shows 3 fish swimming in a circle, an early Christian symbol of the Trinity, disguised to avoid detection by hostile forces. Nearby, a relief of Jonah and the whale adorns a communal dining area, a reminder of resurrection and deliverance to families sharing meager rations. Even the placement of these artworks holds significance. Crosses often mark intersections where tunnels branch, like spiritual road signs guiding the faithful through the labyrinth. This wasn't random artistry, it was theology in 3 dimensions, transforming cold stone into a living catechism. The techniques used underscore the urgency behind these creations. Unlike the leisurely brushstrokes of surface churches, many underground frescoes were painted hastily, their pigments mixed with egg or plant binders rather than costly imported materials. Some figures lack the gilded halos of their above-ground counterparts, their simplicity betraying the constraints of secrecy and scarce resources, yet their power is undeniable. In one chamber, a depiction of the Last Supper shows disciples gathered around a low stone table, mirroring the very rooms where underground communities likely celebrated clandestine Eucharists. The art didn't just reflect belief, it reinforced it, turning daily survival into an act of worship. Debates persist about whether these images served practical spiritual functions or were purely devotional. Some scholars point to teaching walls covered in sequential biblical scenes, suggesting they aided oral storytelling in a literate society. Others note how certain frescoes align with lamplight at specific hours, illuminating key figures during prayer times. Then there are the mysterious symbols interlocking circles, star-like patterns that may have served as coded messages or protection charms. The diversity of styles hints at multiple hands and eras, from rough early Christian scratchings to sophisticated Byzantine-era portraits. What's unmistakable is how these artworks humanize the underground experience. A child's tiny cross scratched beside an adult's deeper carving speaks of generations raised in the shadows. Faded red handprints on chapel walls evoke moments of connection, as if worshippers sought to literally touch the divine. Even the mistakes a saint's face left unfinished, a vine spiraling off course, whisper of artists interrupted by danger or displacement. Together, they form a testament not just to survival, but to the unshakable need to create beauty and meaning, even when the world above offered neither. The most poignant artworks may be the simplest, solitary crosses carved near ventilation shafts, where stray beams of sunlight would briefly illuminate them at dawn. In those fleeting moments, the underground cities weren't just hiding places, they were vessels of light, both literal and spiritual, proving that even in exile, the human spirit refuses to live without wonder. The story of Cappadocia's underground cities doesn't end with their construction or even their peak use, it ends with their abandonment, a mystery as layered as the cities themselves. After centuries of providing refuge, these subterranean marvels were gradually deserted, their echoing chambers falling silent. But why? The answers are as complex as the tunnels left behind. One prevailing theory points to the shifting tides of history. As invading forces receded and empires stabilized, the constant threat that once drove people underground began to fade. By the time the Seljuk Turks established control in the 11th century, Cappadocia was no longer a battleground but a crossroads of trade and culture. With surface life becoming safer, generations who had known only darkness finally emerged into the sunlight, leaving behind the only homes they'd ever known. Yet safety alone doesn't explain the haste with which some cities were vacated. In Derinkuyu, archaeologists have found cooking pots still perched on hearths, tools abandoned mid-use, and even footprints preserved in soft stone dust, as if families departed in a single, decisive moment. This has led some researchers to propose a more violent culprit: earthquakes. Cappadocia sits on geological fault lines, and seismic activity could have collapsed critical tunnels or blocked ventilation shafts, rendering entire levels uninhabitable. Cracks in certain chambers align with known quakes from the medieval period, while sediment layers show sudden influxes of rubble. For communities already living on the edge, even one tremor could have been the final push to abandon their underground world. But there's another, quieter possibility: environmental change. As the climate grew wetter and more predictable, the very features that made underground life practical became less necessary. Why endure the darkness when surface farms could thrive again? Why rely on painstakingly carved cisterns when rivers flowed reliably? The city's meticulous water systems, once life-saving, may have become obsolete, their maintenance too burdensome for populations eager to embrace open skies. Perhaps the most poignant clue lies in what followed. Above ground, Cappadocians began carving churches and homes into the same soft rock, creating the famous fairy chimney villages that still dot the landscape today. It's as if the skills honed below were transplanted upward, a cultural continuity bridging two worlds. Some families likely kept their underground chambers as cellars or seasonal shelters, a backup plan should danger return. Others may have simply walked away, the weight of history too heavy to carry into a new era. The truth is likely a tapestry of all these threads: peace loosening the grip of fear, geology rewriting the rules of habitation, and generations finally daring to imagine a life beyond the shadows. What's undeniable is this: the abandonment wasn't an ending, but a transformation. The people who left these cities didn't vanish, they carried their resilience with them, etching new stories into the sunlit rock above. The underground cities didn't fail, they fulfilled their purpose, then released their inhabitants back into the light. Today, Cappadocia's underground cities face a new kind of invasion, one of awe-struck tourists rather than armed soldiers. Over 2 million visitors now descend into these ancient chambers each year, their footsteps echoing where once only whispers dared to tread. While tourism breathes economic life into the region, it also brings an invisible threat: the slow erosion of history itself. Every touch wears away at carvings that survived a millennium of sieges. Every exhale adds moisture to air that once preserved frescoes in perfect dryness. The very act of loving these places risks loving them to death. Authorities walk a razor's edge between access and preservation. At Derinkuyu, humidity sensors now dot the walls, monitoring conditions in real time. Visitor numbers are capped per hour, with timed entry slots preventing overcrowding that could strain ventilation systems older than the Crusades. In some sensitive chambers, protective glass shields religious artwork from wandering hands, while LED lighting mimicking ancient oil lamp spectra replaces harsh modern bulbs that could fade pigments. These measures aren't just about conservation. They're about respecting the ingenuity of the original builders, whose passive climate control systems worked perfectly until we disrupted them with our presence. The solutions often come from unlikely collaborations. Local stonemasons, using techniques passed down through generations, repair cracked walls with the same volcanic mortar their ancestors might have used. Meanwhile, aerospace engineers from Istanbul analyze airflow patterns with drone-mounted sensors, merging ancient wisdom with cutting-edge tech. Some of the most innovative fixes are surprisingly low-tech. Sheepskin rugs placed in high-traffic areas protect floors from shoe abrasion, while hemp ropes guide visitors without the need for intrusive railings. But preservation isn't just physical, it's cultural. Virtual reality stations at entry points now let tourists explore restricted areas digitally, reducing pressure on fragile tunnels. School programs teach children to view themselves as guardians of this heritage, not just beneficiaries. Even the gift shops play a role, selling replicas of artifacts so visitors can take home a piece of history without disturbing the real thing. The stakes couldn't be higher. These cities survived Persians, Romans, and earthquakes, but can they survive their own popularity? The answer lies in rethinking what tourism means. This isn't about ticking a bucket list, it's about bearing witness to human resilience. When a visitor crouches through a 2,000-year-old doorway or traces a cross carved by a fleeing Christian, they're not just observing history, they're becoming part of its preservation. The true test won't be whether we can protect these underground wonders from time, but whether we're worthy of the stories they've safeguarded for so long. Ground-penetrating radar has peeled back layers of Cappadocia's hidden history like never before, revealing chambers and tunnels that lay undocumented for centuries. Recent scans near Nevşehir uncovered an entirely new network of rooms beneath a modern neighborhood, their walls etched with markings that don't match any known Byzantine or Hittite designs. These discoveries aren't just expanding the map, they're rewriting assumptions about how far these cities truly stretch. Scientists now suspect that what we've excavated so far might represent less than a third of the total underground landscape. Every sweep of the radar sends pulses of excitement through the archaeological community, as each hidden void could hold clues to forgotten migrations, lost technologies, or even earlier civilizations that predate recorded history. But it's not just about finding empty spaces. Researchers are deploying laser spectroscopy to analyze the air trapped in sealed chambers, uncovering traces of ancient fires, cooking residues, and even the microbial signatures of long-vanished inhabitants. In one astonishing case, air samples from a previously undisturbed chamber contained pollen from olive trees and grapevines, evidence of underground agriculture or perhaps ritual offerings. Meanwhile, erosion patterns on staircases are being studied with 3D modeling to calculate how many footsteps wore down the stone over centuries, offering a rough census of population density during peak use. These aren't just snapshots of the past, they're living data streams, revealing how communities adapted to life beneath the surface down to the smallest detail. Construction methods are also coming under fresh scrutiny. Engineers using stress test simulations have recreated how Cappadocia's builders stabilized multi-level structures without modern supports. The secret, strategic pillar placement and arched ceilings that distributed weight like nature's own honeycombs. Even the seemingly haphazard angles of certain tunnels now make sense. They follow natural fault lines in the volcanic rock, minimizing collapse risks. This wasn't guesswork, it was geology harnessed with precision. The most tantalizing questions remain unanswered. Why do some newly discovered tunnels dead end abruptly? Were they decoys, unfinished expansions, or entrances to still hidden chambers? And what about the peculiar acoustic properties of certain oval rooms where whispers carry with eerie clarity? Theories range from clandestine meeting spaces to ancient surveillance systems, with drone-mounted thermal cameras identifying temperature anomalies deep in the rock, and AI algorithms cross-referencing tunnel patterns with historical invasion records. The pace of discovery is accelerating. Science isn't just illuminating Cappadocia's underground cities, it's breathing new life into them, one revelation at a time. Among the more outlandish theories surrounding Cappadocia's underground cities is the persistent whisper of extraterrestrial involvement. Some point to the precision of the ventilation shafts, their near-perfect alignment and seamless integration into the rock as evidence of technology beyond ancient human capability. Others fixate on the city's sheer scale, arguing that moving thousands of tons of stone without modern machinery would have required otherworldly assistance. These ideas, while lacking any archaeological backing, tap into a deeper human tendency, our need to explain the inexplicable by reaching for the extraordinary. When faced with achievements that seem to defy their era, it's almost comforting to imagine hidden hands at work, whether from advanced lost civilizations or visitors from the stars. What's fascinating isn't the theories themselves, but why they endure. Cappadocia's underground cities are so masterfully engineered that they feel out of place in the timeline of human progress. The mind rebels at the idea that people with simple tools could create something so complex, so we invent narratives to bridge the gap. It's the same impulse that attributes the pyramids to alien architects or Atlantis to ancient astronauts, a reluctance to accept that our ancestors were far more ingenious than we often give them credit for. The city's very existence challenges our assumptions about technological evolution, and for some, that cognitive dissonance is easier to resolve with cosmic intervention than with the slower, messier truth of human perseverance. Yet these speculations also reveal something beautiful about our relationship with history. The gaps in our knowledge become canvases for imagination, spaces where mythology and reality blur. Local guides in Cappadocia sometimes lean into this, sharing tales of star doors hidden in the deepest tunnels or carvings that resemble modern astronaut helmets. These stories, however fanciful, keep visitors engaged, transforming a dusty archaeological site into a living mystery. And in a way, that's not so different from how these spaces were originally used, as places where ordinary reality could be suspended, whether for survival, worship, or now wonder. Mainstream archaeologists naturally dismiss these theories, pointing to the abundant evidence of human labor, tool marks on walls, pottery shards in refuse pits, and the gradual evolution of techniques visible across different excavation layers. But even they acknowledge the power of the unknown. The unanswered questions like how builders calculated air flow without mathematics or coordinated such vast projects without written plans leave just enough room for speculation to thrive. It's a reminder that history isn't just about facts, it's about the stories we tell to make sense of our past. Ultimately, the alien theories say less about Cappadocia and more about us. They're a mirror reflecting our own era's obsessions with technology, with hidden knowledge, with the possibility that we're not alone. The truth of these cities may be earthbound, but their legacy is cosmic, proof that human curiosity, whether directed toward the stars or the subterranean, is boundless. And perhaps that's the real secret buried in these tunnels, not evidence of extraterrestrials, but the enduring allure of the unexplained, pulling us deeper into the dark, just as it did those who carved these chambers centuries ago. Lessons from Cappadocia's underground cities resonate far beyond their ancient tunnels, their masterclasses in human resilience. When threats loomed, these builders didn't just flee, they reimagined survival, transforming raw rock into thriving communities. Their ingenuity speaks to a universal truth. Adversity doesn't just test us, it reveals what we're capable of. Consider the precision of those ventilation shafts, functioning flawlessly for centuries without a single gear or motor. Or the rolling stone doors, balanced so perfectly that a child could move them. These weren't accidents, they were solutions born from necessity, proving that constraints often spark the most brilliant innovations. What's equally striking is how these cities exemplify communal strength. Unlike isolated bunkers, they were designed for collective living, shared kitchens, communal worship spaces, even schools carved into the rock. Every architectural choice reflects an unspoken pact. We survive together or not at all. That ethos feels strikingly relevant today as modern societies grapple with climate crises and global instability. The underground cities remind us that resilience isn't just about sturdy walls, it's about the bonds between those sheltered within them. The builders' environmental adaptations are another revelation. Without modern technology, they harnessed the Earth's natural properties for climate control, water storage, and waste management. Their passive cooling systems, airflow channels, leveraging temperature differentials rival contemporary green architecture. In an era of energy crises, these ancient techniques offer unexpected inspiration. Imagine applying similar principles to modern buildings, reducing reliance on fragile power grids. The past, it seems, might hold blueprints for a more sustainable future. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the city's very existence, the art of vanishing. In a world obsessed with visibility, social media, skyscrapers, constant connectivity, these builders mastered the power of invisibility as a survival strategy. They understood that sometimes the strongest move isn't to fight or flee, but to become untouchable. It's a concept that challenges modern notions of security, suggesting that true safety might not come from taller walls or bigger weapons, but from the ability to retreat, regroup, and re-emerge on your own terms. Yet abandonment carries its own wisdom. When the threats passed, the people of Cappadocia didn't cling to their underground havens, they returned to the light. Their legacy isn't one of perpetual fear, but of knowing when to hide and when to rebuild. That balance between caution and courage, between remembering danger and embracing hope, feels like a lesson for every generation. These cities weren't tombs, they were cocoons, temporary shelters meant to preserve life until the world above became habitable again. In their quiet stones, we find an enduring message. Resilience isn't about living underground forever. It's about ensuring you and your community live to see the sun rise. The future of Cappadocia's underground cities shimmers with possibility, as if the very rock holds its breath waiting to reveal more secrets. With every passing year, new technologies peel back layers of history we once thought were lost forever. Ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR scanning, and even artificial intelligence are reshaping what we know and what we might still uncover. Just beneath the surface of modern Cappadocia, there could be entire networks of tunnels and chambers still untouched, their stories frozen in time. researchers now estimate that less than 40% of these subterranean labyrinths have been fully explored. That means over half of this hidden world remains in darkness, waiting for the right tool, the right scan, or the right curious mind to bring it to light. One of the most exciting frontiers is the use of 3D mapping to reconstruct these cities digitally. Archaeologists are stitching together thousands of laser scans to create immersive models, allowing them to walk through collapsed tunnels or peer into sealed-off chambers without disturbing a single stone. These virtual excavations have already revealed tantalizing clues, like the faint outlines of what might be a vast, undiscovered complex beneath the town of Avonos. Early scans show corridors branching outward like spokes on a wheel, suggesting a hub that could connect multiple known cities into one sprawling underground network. If proven, this would rewrite our understanding of how extensively ancient Cappadocians reshaped the earth beneath their feet. But technology isn't just helping us find new spaces, it's preserving the ones we already have. The delicate balance of humidity and temperature that kept these cities intact for centuries is now threatened by modern breath, foot traffic, and even camera flashes. In response, conservationists are deploying smart sensors that monitor air quality in real time, triggering alarms if conditions shift toward danger. Some chambers have been fitted with climate-controlled glass barriers, nearly invisible to visitors but crucial for protecting fragile frescoes from further decay. Meanwhile, drones equipped with thermal cameras patrol inaccessible areas, spotting cracks or moisture buildup before they become disasters. The human element is just as vital. Local stonemasons, trained in ancient techniques, work alongside engineers to reinforce crumbling passageways using the same volcanic mortar their ancestors might have used. Universities are partnering with Turkish cultural ministries to train a new generation of specialists in geoarchaeology, a blend of geology and archaeology tailored to Cappadocia's unique challenges. Even tourists play a role. Augmented reality apps now guide visitors along paths that minimize damage, turning exploration into an act of preservation rather than erosion. What mysteries might these efforts unlock? Some researchers hope to finally solve the puzzle of the city's earliest origins. Were the Hittites truly the first to carve here, or did another, older culture leave its mark? Others are chasing whispers of a legendary, lower level at Derinkuyu, mentioned in medieval texts but never found. Then there are the smaller, intimate secrets, a child's toy buried in rubble, a love note scratched into stone, or a kitchen midden holding clues about daily meals. Each discovery stitches another thread into the tapestry of this underground civilization. The most profound question isn't just what we'll find, it's how these cities will speak to future generations. As climate change and global instability echo the pressures that once drove people underground, Cappadocia's tunnels feel less like relics and more like blueprints. Their lessons about sustainability, community, and resilience resonate with eerie urgency. Perhaps that's why preservation matters so deeply. These stones don't just hold the past. They might just hold a map for our future. Cappadocia's underground cities stand as a testament to human ingenuity, their true purpose still shimmering with mystery like sunlight through ancient ventilation shafts. Were they fortresses against invaders, sacred spaces for the persecuted, or climate-proof havens during droughts? The brilliance lies in their refusal to fit neatly into any single category. They were all these things and more, evolving with each new threat and generation. Think about the thousands of hands that carved these passageways, the countless breaths drawn in their chambers, the whispered prayers and hushed warnings that once echoed through the dark. These cities weren't just built, they were lived into existence layer by layer, necessity by necessity. What's remarkable is how their lessons ripple into our modern world. In an era of rising sea levels and extreme weather, the builders' passive cooling systems and water conservation techniques feel eerily prescient. Their communal design, shared kitchens, collective defenses offers a blueprint for resilience in an age of uncertainty. Even their abandonment carries wisdom. Knowing when to emerge from the shadows is as vital as knowing when to retreat into them. These tunnels don't just belong to history, they speak to it, whispering across centuries about adaptation and survival. Yet for all we've uncovered, the cities guard their deepest secrets closely. Every new scan reveals another hidden chamber. Every air sample from a sealed corridor hints at untold stories. Perhaps that's why they captivate us so, not just for what they are, but for what they represent. The enduring human spirit that refuses to be crushed, whether by sword, storm, or time itself. Now we turn to you. After this journey through Cappadocia's depths, what do you believe was the driving force behind these subterranean marvels? Was it fear, faith, or something even more profound? Drop your theories in the comments. We're as eager to hear them as we are to keep unearthing history's riddles. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery with us, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an adventure. Until next time, keep looking beneath the surface because history's greatest stories are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for curious minds to